I think he represents more of the traditional paying off debt, telling the truth. He's kind of like the old traditional. I think in the text he's kind of described as a rich rich person. So it's more traditional. So pay off your debts, tell the truth, and you're gonna achieve justice.
Good. Yeah. No, you're right in terms of the content and in terms of the dramatic setting. He's more of a traditional older guy focused on money and contracts. Yes.
So yeah, like you said, material.
Mm-hmm.
I think we also talked about a lot how it's conditional.
Good.
Because he was not able to have that when he was growing up because he was focused on making money.
Mm-hmm.
But then now he's old, he can honor all his contracts because he's rich.
Right. Okay, so the first thing you see is with Cephalus, and this is one of the things that is lovely about reading Plato is how dynamic the text and the characters are. And because we talked last time about Diotima and the idea that philosophy is an ascent and everything that is has things in it that are true as well as untrue, that there's something very normy about Cephalus in some ways, and also very traditional, pay your debts, tell the truth, don't break contracts. He's at the end of his life, later guy. People say as you get older, you get more conservative. That I don't know if that's borne out by the social science, but that's an old saying. And it's a very conventional presentation of justice from a character that seems to suit it. But as you keep going, you start to see this other side of it, where Socrates and him are engaging in this questioning, right? And it's it is true. And this is the part that I mean about the beauty of reading Plato, is that you see you see the parts of what Cephalus says that resonate with you. Even if you don't think it's an exhaustive definition of justice, most of us are kind of just naturally going to be yeah, of course, it's better to pay your debts. It's better to keep your contracts. It's better not to lie. That seems above board. But like you said, when we continue, when we keep going, this other side emerges inside him. And it is the flip side of, he starts to discuss, when I was young, I was driven by passions, and I love being old. I love old age because I am no longer driven by my desires for sex, my desires for money, my desires for food. I have peace. And so I really like that I can be just now because I don't have these desires pushing me into breaking contracts or telling lies or stealing or exploiting people or not paying debts or anything like that. And you kind of get to this place where you realize, gosh, basically what he seems to be saying is that he is able to be just in the way he understands justice, the definition he's given, because he's an old man. It has nothing to do with choice. If he woke up the next day and all his desires and youth were back, would he keep this practice of justice as he understands it? No. The only reason he's keeping it is because he doesn't want those other things anymore. Which by implication, as you keep thinking about it and you keep discussing it, you keep reading, you see, well, how did he get to this wealth and position in the first place? It seems that he was well acquainted with his desires and with breaking contracts, with creating debts, scheming, cheating, not compensating fairly. And that's how he got his wealth in the first place. So now, to become just, he spent a lifetime committing injustice. His justice is based on a life of injustice. It's only possible because of that. Why? Because in order, he says at one point, well, the reason I can keep faith and keep contracts is because I can afford to. I have so much money, there's no reason for me to break contracts or break faith. Well, how'd you get your money? By breaking contracts and breaking faith. And it turns out, actually, that at the end of the day, what he's done is he just has kind of moved this transactional understanding of justice onto the afterlife. Because when he leaves Socrates, he says, I gotta go make a sacrifice, right? Make a sacrifice of some chickens, roosters, to the gods. This is something I do regularly. This is something I do like this time of day. Why? Because he has to atone. He has to atone for all the injustice he did when he was driven by his pleasures and in his youth. How does he do that? He uses the money that he made from those injustices to pay for sacrifices to the gods. So the gods can be bought off. You don't have to practice justice to get their favor. What you have to do is feed them, whatever that takes, whatever form that takes. Now he's going to feed them the sacrifices, and they're going to look the other way. It's a really dark place that you end up with Cephalus. So it's also a nice example of this thing that happens in the Republic, where something he says resonates with us and something he says kind of repulses us. Like, we don't want to think that you can only be just by committing injustice, right? That seems to be morally something most of us wouldn't be comfortable with saying. Yeah, I'm going to commit injustice to be just ultimately. But also, all of us probably on an intuitive level think, yeah, I mean, it's better not to lie. That makes sense. So this is a good example of that dynamic. Any more comments on Cephalus? You guys are doing really good. Okay, so that. Oh, go ahead.
Like, depending on your debt, didn't Socrates, I think Cephalus said, like, if you borrow an axe, I'm not too sure on this one.
Mm-hmm.
If you borrow an axe from, like, your friend, and your friend goes, like, crazy and insane.
Good.
And wouldn't returning it just be, like, just as unjust or, like, if not more harmful? Because if the friend's insane, he's going to go and probably kill people with that weapon or that axe or whatever.
Yeah, you're bringing up the example of the crazy friend with the weapon. And this is part of what starts to emerge in the discussion with Cephalus is that, you know, one of the things that we have to ask about justice, if we're going to say it has anything to do with keeping faith and keeping contracts, you have to figure out what's owed. You have to figure out what is owed to another. And so trying to nail that down is a really important step, and also a way that this dialogue starts to get into the next phase. And you give the example of the crazy person who owns the weapon, but if you give it back to them, technically you're giving them what they owe, like what you owe them. But in another way, is it really what you owe them? Do you owe a crazy person a weapon so they can hurt themselves or others? No, right? And so Socrates is showing kind of the difficulty of nailing these concepts down. And this is our second, we're going to get into the second definition here of justice, which is with our friend Polemarchus. And as he suggested, right, this turn starts around 331 E with the example of taking something harmful from the crazy man, right? So an example that is maybe more relevant. Well, it might not be so relevant for you guys as it was when I was in college, because y'all have Uber now, but we didn't have Uber. But like, it used to be like your friend, and if you went to a party and your friend drove there and then they got really drunk and you rode over there with them, they might be like, I'm going to drive back. I'm going to drive back. That's my car, right? And in a strict sense, it is their car and not yours. In another sense, you know, especially like, let's say you worked something out in advance where you were going to drive it home, right? You were the designated driver or whatever. They've decided, no, it's mine. It's my property. I'm going to do it, right? Well, if you have Kephalus' definition, you're kind of limited. You have to give the keys back. But we all know why it's a bad idea to give the keys back. Just from a consequentialist perspective, it's not a good idea to give a drunk person their keys and tell them to drive, and get in the car with them is even stupider. But like on top of that, there is a way in which we would all sort of say, do I really owe this person their car keys? Like, I owe them their car keys when they're hammered? Is that how we would talk about justice and rightness? Probably not. Like, we all can understand that there are circumstances that will change what is owed, right? And this is part of what the example of the impaired person with the dangerous item or weapon is meant to examine. Because everyone, whether you're talking about it from the chance of security, from the perspective of security, or you're talking about it from the perspective of friendship, if you care about the other person, you care about other people, you don't want damage, you're not going to enable their damage, right? And that's even making sense from a self-interest perspective. It's in your self-interest that they not drive that way. So we have to refine our definition. This is the first time that we have a refined definition. We move from the first definition, which focuses on telling the truth and like keeping contracts, paying your debts, to the new one, which becomes associated with Polemarchus. And that is justice. What can we say about justice? We can say that it gives benefits and harms to friends and enemies. It's a 332D. It gives benefits and harms to friends and enemies. Kind of obvious from the perspective of war, right? It seems early on in the dialogue, you know, you want your allies to win battles, you want your enemies to lose battles. What about in peace? In peace, what this would mean, according to the discussion, is you keep contracts. You penalize people who break contracts and laws, and you give benefits to people who keep contracts and keep laws, okay, in peacetime. You also, this is one of the first times you see, well, I don't know if it's technically the first time, but this is an important moment if we're thinking about Plato as an inheritor of these older traditions we've inherited, one of them being Homer, right, and the Iliad and the Odyssey. Because this is the first time you really have to start thinking about a super problematic character in some respects, I mean, depending if you talk to some scholars, for Plato, who is Odysseus. Okay, like nowadays, guys, I don't know enough about how like you live your lives and consume social media, so I might give an example and it might make no sense for you. But the thing that I always think about at this point in the Republic is the idea of subtweeting. Do you know what subtweeting is? Or vague posting might be another way, where you make a message on social media, an image or a statement, and you are clearly engaging with some figure or topic or controversy, but in a way that is implicit, maybe kind of passive aggressive, right? Sneak dissing? Yeah. Retweeting often happens, is a way of that subtweeting happens.
Outrageous things on a really important kind of sensitive topic for people just saying the things that everyone knows wrong. They're just trying to get a reaction out of people.
That can be part of it too, right? Retweeting, doing like provocative tweeting that you're trying to rage bait.
Yeah, rage baiting is like if there's a video of a dog being killed and then someone types under it, that dog deserved it. Like, of course,
right. Okay.
Like,
good.
Bring a rise out of people, but
good.
Okay.
The dog, and then someone says that dog deserves it, and that's a rage baiter. Yeah, and the dog's a good example, right? Because Polemarchus has dogs, or dogs come up, right? Or like sneak this sort of like an underhanded, indirect.
Yeah, you'll make a reference, and it's like if you're within the culture and you understand like the context of the music, you'll understand he's talking about that guy very clearly. But outside of the music, you don't know that's a
yeah, outside of the music, you won't know. But inside the world, you'll catch the context of this. Is that a limited hangout?
What's up?
Limited hangout?
What do you mean?
Limited hangout is a phrase. Well, this I know from conspiracy circles. So again, I don't know if you're going to. Limited hangouts where like people are talking to each other, but they're using language in a way that is kind of keeping a boundary around the realm of permissible concepts and permissible thought. Yeah. So like a limited hangout is if you're in the know, you're in the know. But not everybody is going to be brought into the know, though they might be given the sense that they are, right? I guess these are all permutations of this kind of thing. That's you guys are really perceptive. The Republic basically does that with Odysseus a lot. Any of the kinds of things you just described, Plato does that with Odysseus all the time. Some scholars think that he does it. He's not completely critical. And I think there are good reasons to think that, actually. We'll see once we get to the end of the book. I have a friend who worked on that, Michelle Kuhn-Miller. But is he just being passive-aggressive here when he brings up Odysseus? One of the things that comes up is, well, we want whatever justice means. We want it to mean something that gets beyond Odysseus. Now, Odysseus is clever, right? And he's tricky. And so maybe technically he might not lie in certain cases because of some small little technical thing, or he does a deceit that you can't really call a deceit in a straightforward way. He breaks a deal that's broken in a creative way. He's clever. He was admired for that. That's one of the things that's really likable about him and kind of fills up the Greek mind and heart. But you see at this point in the dialogue, when they're getting onto the second definition of justice, they're like, well, we want a definition of justice in a way that's Odysseus proof, right? Keep contracts, don't tell lies. Maybe you can have an Odysseus in that context. We want something a little more tangible, more real than that. And this is one of the first moments that you see an introduction of him as a figure of, this guy's a problem. This guy's a problem. We are concerned with him in our philosophy. We are concerned with his example. What is his example? Okay. His example is that cleverness is what virtue and justice are. Cleverness is what justice and virtue are. And this fits together with this thing we've been talking about how for the Greeks, McIntyre presents, you have virtue in a more moral sense, and then you have virtue as the goods of effectiveness or the goods of winning, right? Well, what if you can win, and in that sense, you get the outcome that you want, but you break all these rules or get creative with rules to do it? That's Odysseus. That's cleverness. And Plato's saying that's inadequate. right? He's starting to raise the possibility that is not enough of a moral framework. You aren't leaving this realm that's dividing the goods of effectiveness from the goods of morality. You're staying trapped in it. How do we get out of it? That's what he wants. And that's what Polemarchus wants too. How does Polemarchus is an interesting character. We'll get into that in a little bit. Remember, he actually dies in the revolt against the tyrants that the beginning scene refers back to. So he would be a character, kind of hero everyone would know who's reading it. This definition doesn't work out. Why not? Do you remember? Has a bit.
You can misjudge someone.
You can misjudge someone, right? So what if you say, okay?
Beat up bad people and harm people.
Yeah. What if you say, I'm going to harm my friend and hurt my enemy? This is in accord with justice. But what if you're wrong about who that person really is? What if your friend is really this totally deceptive, awful, terrible person, and you help them, and because you believe there's something else, and you hurt your enemy who was actually the really good one all along? He says, well, okay, what if we maybe tweak things a little bit? We'll say, well, maybe we just need to make a commitment to treating our friends well. So Socrates brings up this example. This is another one of these moments that seems like a digression, but it's not. It actually ends up becoming important pretty quickly. He says, well, think about examples of people who treat people well, but whose actions are not considered just. If you have someone who's a really good ship captain and he treats people well in the capacity of his job or navigates well in the capacity of his job, do you talk about that in terms of justice? Not really. That again seems to have something to do with utility, something to do with effectiveness. It's not exhaustive. It's not that it can't have some meaning or overlap, but if we're looking for precision, we're not going to find it there. Socrates also makes a claim that is kind of, I think it's easy to gloss over, but if you really think about it, it's a bit radical. He argues that the just man will never harm anyone. The just man will always seek to improve others, not to harm people. So on the one hand, this is a direct rejoinder to Polemarchus's definition, because you're saying, well, how can you really be just if you're inflicting harm on anyone? How inflicting harm on an enemy, it seems that won't qualify as an act of justice, because Socrates argues the just man actually never harms anyone, but seeks to improve anyone that they come into contact with. One reason this is kind of, provocative, and people say that all philosophy is a footnote to Plato, is because punishment, a lot of times in law, has something to do with causing pain, right? But punishment has some connection to justice, ostensibly. We talk about proportional punishment, disproportional punishment. If you talk about capital punishment, right, that the state has a right to execute someone, would that fit with Socrates' definitions? This is actually kind of a radical comment. But thinking about it just in the context of the argument itself, the just man will never harm anyone. So you cannot have a definition of justice where you treat enemies badly. Well, for one reason, someone who's really just will never do the unjust deed. I'd write that down. Someone who is really just will never do the unjust deed. And if you think about Hamlet, there's an interesting part at the beginning. In Hamlet, of course, his father has been killed by his uncle so that his uncle can take over the throne and marry Hamlet's mother. And Hamlet finds out about this happening because the ghost of his father comes back and says, I was murdered by your uncle, you need to avenge me. But the rest of the play, of course, we don't need to get into it. That's how the movement of it starts. And his father's ghost, old Hamlet, tells young Hamlet, he gives him 2 ground rules for revenge. And the first ground rule is, don't let anything taint your mind in the pursuit of this justice. And the second is, don't do anything to attack or abuse your mother. Leave her to God's judgment. Now, don't do anything to taint your mind. What that means is, don't do anything that is unwholesome or unsavory or that is unjust in your pursuit of avenging me. Okay, so basically, it's just to avenge me, but you cannot commit injustice to do it. You cannot invite injustice into yourself to achieve that. Hamlet, of course, automatically doesn't listen to him because Hamlet right away is like, oh yeah, okay, to avenge my father and stay alive, I'm going to have to pretend to be crazy, right? So nobody can suspect me while I try to gather evidence and while I try to get close to the king. So he from the start does the thing his dad said don't do, right? Don't pursue justice by taking on a means that is unjust, like deceit. Socrates is saying, the just person, you cannot be just if you're adopting these means that are unjust. What? Because you are what you do in a way, right? And so if you say, I have this just goal and I'm going to achieve it, but the means of how I achieve it, well, you know, a lot of things are on the table for that. At the end of the day, you become as bad as the thing that you're trying to defeat. I mean, this is the thing with Galadriel and Lord of the Rings, right? When she wants the ring, I think this happens with several characters, but she talks about how great and terrible she will be if she would have the ring. But she's thinking about the ring, and she's great and terrible in her beauty and all these things, all her power. But she says the temptation of the ring, she's not going to want the ring because she's like, oh yeah, I want to take control of everything and destroy everything and have all the power in the world. What she's thinking is, I want to defeat Sauron and Saruman. I want to stop all of these evil things from happening. And I want to take away all the harm and pain and injustice in this world. That is why I want this ring. And she has enough self-knowledge to know that is how she would become like Saruman and Sauron, right? By making this deal, this compromise, taking this means, unjust means, she would not be just any longer. It would change her. It would transform her. The other thing is that just from the perspective of the human mind and the human soul, Socrates makes the important claim, and this is something that's going to come up over and over again, that harming someone always makes them worse. Harming someone always makes them worse. The just person wants to leave people improved, not damaged, not destroyed. Yes?
Does he provide examples? Because, like,
There's a doctor in there somehow.
if there's like a thief, he cut his hand off and then he stopped stealing, isn't that like an improvement? at least
Yeah.
societally. Like,
Great, fantastic. Okay, so this is part of what I was gesturing toward when I said that the statement's kind of radical, right? So like there's going to be a whole school of thought about punishment and social containment or social education, right? So the example you give is like there's a certain period where it's very common in law. You don't have these massive incarceration states. Cut off the thief's hand, inhibit his capacity to continue to steal, right? And in the discussions and debates around punishment and moral philosophy, there's a lot of people who would disagree with Plato, right? And who would even say there might be some benefit to cutting off the thief's hand. You're going to stop him from doing this. You're going to help society, and you're going to stop him from continuing to do this thing that's bad for him. So it's bad medicine, but it'll help him in the long run. It's bad medicine, but it will help society in the long run. Some thinkers even go so far as to say if you don't cut off the hand, just to use that thought experiment, you're actually endangering the whole society, right? Sometimes by not enforcing that sort of tough law or inflicting that harm, you're creating the space for lots more people to be harmed.
Also, what is he totally considered harming? Like, would
Good.
throwing someone in jail for a year be considered harmful?
Yeah.
That's unwilling. People don't want to be in jail. So.
No, I love it. What does he mean by harm? And this is kind of something that's floating in that whole passage of the dialogue. Is harm? You're right to bring it up to date. Like our example, is harm being in jail for a year? Is harm paying a fine? What are we talking about when we talk about harm? One way to let me I want us to continue exploring this question, but let me throw in a little bit of like discussion of Polemarchus, because everyone who's giving a definition of justice has a character that we said, this is a play, this is a dramatic setting. So the person's personality is going to be connected to their definition of justice. You guys did a great job of that with Kepler's. What can we tell, if anything, about Polemarchus's personality, Polemarchus's character? Yeah.
Probably has a more logical sense of justice. It's not like emotionally tied.
Okay, that's good. I like that a lot. That Polemarchus and his definition of justice seem to be really practical. That he's trying to get at, what does this look like in terms of effects? What does this look like in terms of, to put it in a concrete way, benefits and harms? Utility, usefulness, good, right? That's really good. And so you can see that practical aspect to his character, absolutely. What else comes out about him? It can just be a vibe. We know he fights later in this war, and he dies. Remember, we talked about that last time. On the Piraeus, where Socrates is stopped, that's the seat of resistance. We know that Cephalus's family was really involved in that, and that Polemarchus gives his life in the rebellion, which the people reading the text would know too. What else? What might that tell us? Yes?
His character kind of was supposed to be, I think, kind of symbolic for democracy, or part of it.
Say more.
And I think that because it's really material.
Good.
It's for its ends, like you said, for the utility of it.
Good.
And then there's the relative aspect to it. Like it's very relative to who is deciding. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's very subjective.
Okay, good.
It's not like transcendent.
You guys are doing a great job. So, things that stand out about Polemarchus, his character's definition of justice, one of them is, as you put it, the sort of utility and practicalness of, or practicality of his definition, right? Literally focusing on benefits and harms. And then you pointed out, this corresponds with a certain earthiness or materialness, right? And the material being kind of, contrasted to the transcendent, right? What else would you add? Does that capture your comment, do you think?
Well, the subjective part to it.
Yes, good. Okay, that's the other thing he introduces, though. It is really interesting. He introduces this category of friends and enemies, right? But as you point out, then a huge part of the definition of justice becomes really relative, right? There's no real content to given to the term friend, given to the term enemy. It's more about, is that person a friend in relationship to you and to your interests? Is that person a friend, an enemy in relation to you and your interests? And then, as you guys pointed out at the beginning, one of the problems with this definition is, well, you could misidentify someone as a friend who's really an enemy, or you could see someone as an enemy who actually isn't acting in an unjust way. So there's this really practical component that he's got, and this real material component he's got. Then there's this way in which he kind of gets squishy, right? I would suggest that combination in the first area, and one of the things that you pointed out is there seems to be, in this focus on efficiency, it seems maybe a little bit less emotional. And as you pointed out, it's more material, it's less transcendent. That's really good. That's true. Okay, so in some ways he seems to be more practical, less emotional, more results-oriented, tangible stuff. But then you have this part of him that's like, but that's my buddy. That's my buddy. That's my friend. Why is he your friend? Because that's my buddy. Should that be your friend? No, that's my buddy, right? That's my homeboy. Okay? This sort of natural affection. I don't know, natural is not the right word. Automatic affection. This is just someone I like, right? As someone I've built bonds with. Someone that fits into what life I live, what things I think are good, what values I have. Friendship for him is about loyalty. Okay, it's really important. Loyalty. And this can be a great trait in some cases. Like, we all want loyal friends, right? Like, if you had a friend and they were someone who wasn't going to be loyal to you, would that be fantastic? Like, would you sign up for that? No. Nobody wants a disloyal friend. But on the other hand, we all have met people who they're like, oh yeah, he's a rapist, but he's my friend. Or, oh yeah, that's my aunt. I know she molested you, but she's my aunt. Okay, I'm using these graphic examples, but I'm doing it to illustrate a point, right? That there's this other side of loyalty where you aren't going to enter into any questions about whether that person is owed your dedication, is owed your trust, is owed your friendship, and you're wanting to give them benefits. You're wanting to help them, or to hurt someone to protect them. And this is something you see in cover-ups all the time. You can look at any cover-up. You can look at like Sandusky cover-up. You can look at Epstein. You can and pick your poison. There's always people who say, well, I don't like this bad thing that's happening, but I'm going to cooperate with it because of the team I'm on. Like, I mean, in Sandusky, it's a literal team, but it like the ideological team I'm on, or the social team I'm on, right? And we can all see how, sometimes social bonds facilitate great and wonderful things. They can also become a place where injustice can flourish. There's a reason Polemarchus is so fascinating. He is very spirited. I'm going to try to bring this up now. It'll make more sense later. Cephalus, old guy, focused on desires, basically like, I'm a good person now that I don't want to have sex. That's basically what it amounts to. I mean, that's a reductive account, but it's sort of there, right? If you think about him and you think about the part of human psychology he deals with, he seems to be really in the realm of appetites, right? What you want. He wants to eat. He wants to screw. He wants to buy stuff. Okay, that's where he stays. That's the realm of his psychology. Polemarchus is in a different realm. It's not the appetites. It's what Plato is going to talk about later as thumos. I'd write that down. Or the spirited part of the soul. We'll talk about that in more detail later. But thumos isn't like, it's not quite the same thing as an appetite, like the drive for sex or food. But it's also not quite rational. I mean, I don't know if you'd say it's irrational, maybe it's sub-rational or irrational. It's not, meaning it's not an affair of the mind. The spirit is the word that's used, the spiritedness. Sorry, I'm going to eat a little bit. And like, we all have known someone who'll be like, that's my bud. The spirited part of the soul is where that comes from. That human instinct comes from. It's the same part of the soul that, like, if someone attacks your mom or says anything bad to your mom, you don't sit there and think rationally, that person's something bad about my mom, right? Now I have to defend my mom. You just feel it come up inside you like, stop it. Stop it. It's not rational. It's not irrational. It's not rational. Or someone hits your kid, something like that. You see what I mean? It's a different part of the human soul. And it can be good, it can be bad, it can be complicated. That's what Polemarchus represents. There's a reason that he's the one who gives this definition. And it's because he was a brave soldier who died in a rebellion. Okay? He's associated with warriors, with soldiers, with youthful energy, the capacity for that great spiritedness that can go either way. I think this is part of why, with him, to get back to your question, I think this is part of why Socrates with Polemarchus really tries to press the point of the good man harms no one. And you brought up kind of the counter examples to this. Well, sometimes if you don't inflict harm, you're actually creating a space for more social damage, or maybe that the person themselves will commit more damage of different kinds.
On like a smaller scale,
Mm-hmm.
correcting your children
Right.
Gotta give them some harsh words sometimes to grow into better people. You know?
Yeah, like a consequence, right? Good. Yes.
I think Plato was also trying to drive the idea that the just man has to be a mindset, if that makes sense. I don't think it was
Say more.
explicitly stated, but based on what he said so far in the context of the story we're reading, it's kind of like if you have the mentality that everything you're doing is with the intention of being just, then it is just. Even if it may not necessarily like look just, if you're doing it with the intention of doing the right thing and being a just person, then that's why the just man.
Okay. This is a really interesting point too. Like, what about if you intend the just, and from the outside it's perceived as unjust?
Kind of like what he said with the child analogy.
Mhm.
If the end goal is to correct their child so that they will be better, that end goal is just. So therefore, that action, whether they cry or they feel sad or if they were a bit harsh, some people would look at that and be like, that's not nice. But it's just because you had the intention of doing something good, which is correcting their child to be better. So that's kind of like the ends must justify the means, and if the end is to be just, then the means are kind of like, but trying to be just, you're a just man, you can't do anything.
Good. You know, and you guys kind of, by bringing this up, you're circling back to something that came up with our discussion of Polemarchus too, which in the discussion of Polemarchus, because remember, I mean, a lot of the things Socrates is trying to do is he's trying to raise points to consider and to keep in mind, not necessarily to resolve them. And so you'll have these recurring themes. And so for Cephalus, there came a point where we talked about how are pain and pleasure operating here in this discussion of justice. And this is another moment where pleasure and pain come into discussion, right? It seems that whatever justice is, you're going to have some account of how to factor pleasures and pains into it. It's really important to remember that. And so what both of you are pointing out is like, well, if we're talking about harms and benefits and we're talking about, what's the right word? Punishment that's meant to be educative, sometimes pain is educative. Is he saying that consequences are off the table? You know, if you're trying to put it in more contemporary language, let's think about it from the perspective of you guys are doing a really good job. And I think too, this, you can see the Polemarchus character kind of in this back and forth. Do you guys remember when when Socrates talks about the beat dog in this section, the dog getting beat, or the animal that gets beat? Well, I guess if you beat a dog, how does that dog start behaving? Scared? So, tell me more about what that looks like. Like, I know it sounds like kind of like, well, of course you know what scared means, but like, what does a scared dog do?
It starts to act different, more. It can either go like different ways, like aggressive or
Good.
into itself.
Good.
It just depends on who the dog is.
Okay, fantastic. Very good. Very good. Right. A dog that's been abused, you know, they're going to live in fear. They're going to have a fear reaction to their treatment. And like you pointed out, this can go in a number of different directions. The two kind of biggest ones are you can have a dog that becomes overly aggressive about everything and just mean, right? And people who want to have dogs that they use for criminal activity, you know, beating them can be a part of that because it changes their nature. it makes them have this taste for pain and blood. And then you also can have the kind of dog that gets beat and then becomes very neurotic, very scared, always peeing itself, you know, or the dog that just becomes very internal, very quiet, very hiding itself, afraid of the world. Why do you think, and here I'm just, I mean, to me, this is always part of the text that's resonated with me. Maybe I'm making a bigger deal out of it than it is. Why do you think that Socrates is choosing to talk about this beat dog to Polemarchus? Because every decision matters textually. Yes.
Maybe he's equating it with like the morality of punishment, and like if you beat the dog to correct it, you may lash out more, or you may fall in line and like be quiet and fit into society or whatever. So
yeah. Okay, good. So one thing he might be trying to raise, right, for this character is the idea that, well, sometimes someone inflicts punishment for the sake of some social goal, like completely uniform behavior, right? And that's a good example, right? You don't want, you were right to bring that up, that you want someone to follow every rule, follow every law, follow every authority. You set up an incentive system for that. And why might that appeal to Polemarchus? He is a martial guy, right? There's an element in which part of his training is to attack. Part of his training is to receive orders, to not get out of line. So it's going to resonate with him on some level, I think. That it's going to will make him have to ask about his own training, his own education. Yes?
Did the analogy mention anything about like how dogs are like they have a good sense of discernment, or for some people they may be nice, but for some
Yeah, I love it. This is going to become really important later too. Okay, so, and this is one of these. I like Polemarchus a lot. This is one of the other attributes about a dog, right? That is relevant to this part of the discussion and to the later discussion generally. Is like, yeah, I mean, dogs, they do seem to have a sense about people. You can say a lot of times that they might perceive things about another person. Some of them can tell, you know, who means to do harm or who is not a threat. I mean, we can't say that this is universally the case, but every culture has discussions like this about dogs and other creatures, that sometimes they can perceive things on a level that we don't, right? And so, like you said, a dog, in a lot of ways, can symbolize a type of discernment, right? I think that is actually a big part of the analysis going on here, because if we're thinking about Polemarchus as a spirited part of the soul, or is that part of himself being the biggest part? The spirited part, again, if it's working well, it's operating with that model of the discerning dog, right? It gets set off at the right moment. The dog isn't like reasoning and collecting evidence. The dog is discerning a vibe. Okay, so in this discussion, the discernment of the spirited soul being rightly formed to know who is a friend and enemy is already being raised at this point, right? Because a dog that is trained to know a friend from an enemy and can do this is a great benefit to society. That is something that's really good. But there are lots of ways that dog can go wrong. And Socrates is suggesting, I think, that particularly with spirited people who are prone to loyalty, if they are taught to love the wrong things or wrong people, they can become very destructive. And a lot of times, loving the wrong thing, loving the wrong person is something that happens to them through a process of being broken down and abused. But someone who is more spirited, whose loyalty is cultivated toward the good, toward what is good, to defending what is good, like a golden retriever type of thing, you know, that is priceless. But like you're pointing out, all of these things are being brought into the text and multiple different outcomes raised. And I think you did a really good job with that, everyone. You guys did good because you're already showing, like, on the outside of the text, it looks like there's been certain resolutions, but actually the discussion that you're going through by going through this text has raised a lot of questions and a lot of tensions that you're still going to have to explore. Let's move on to the third definition, unless anyone has anything else to say about Polemarchus. You have anything to say about Polemarchus?
No.
You have anything to say about the third definition?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you want to say?
Well, Thrasymachus, in the context, he's like, I haven't written it down. People say he's like aggressive sophist, and argue that power defines like morality.
Yeah.
And he's like all about power, cynicism, and political realism, if I have to say. Like, he kind of sees things like as they are, not as they should be.
Ooh, interesting. Okay. You brought up a lot. So if we're doing this thing where each interlocutor is, I hate this marker. If each interlocutor is more a different part of the soul.
Professor Lusky had a term for it. I can't remember. Timocrat, I think that was
The Timocrat, yeah. Timocrat. Good. I'm gonna put that kind of on this side of the board for now because it is it's important to note, but the full-fledged significance of it is going to come up for us in book 8. But you're right, it's everything in book 8 is prefigured early on.
He says that justice is the advantage of the stronger.
Okay. Justice is the advantage of the stronger against the weak. This is his definition. I write that down. Thrasymachus says justice is the advantage of the stronger.
Sorry, could you repeat what I'm talking about again?
Oh, Thrasymachus.
Thrasymachus?
Yeah, I'll write it out on the board. Thrasymachus. This is the advantage of the stronger over the weak. You brought up he is a sophist. Can anyone define what a sophist is? Or what sophistry is?
It's like deceiving and using like fallacious arguments.
Okay, good, right. A good example of a sophist is someone who basically uses like logical fallacies. Good, guys. That's definitely going to be something that logical fallacies, sort of maybe like rhetoric, trickery and deceit in their language, fancy techniques to win arguments.
I remember he get like really, really mad at Plato too, or at Socrates, like kind of when they first were like having the debate.
Oh yeah.
He like was yelling at him and like trying to like kill him and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Very good. Very good.
He's very hot-headed.
He's super hot-headed.
And he's Kepler's son, I think. No, he's not.
So the sophist is someone who is basically they're paid or they have some self-interested reason to make a particular argument. And they're being paid or incentivized to make this argument as airtight as possible, whether or not it has any relationship to what's true. Okay, so learning how to use logical fallacies, certain types of rhetoric, deceit, learning how to manipulate and appeal to people to make the weaker argument the stronger, independent of truth. That's what a sophist does. And they are shown as being in contrast to a philosopher. Okay, that's part of why Thrasymachus and Socrates have this beef going on. Because internally in Athens, if someone is called a sophist or a sophist, that's in contrast to someone who is the philosopher who uses arguments to uncover and explore truth. Right? So they're not getting paid to make any kind of argument. They're following truth wherever it leads, right? Yes?
Calling someone a sophist be considered like insulting, or is that just a role people have and that's understood?
Yeah, good. That's a great question. Would calling someone a sophist be insulting? Can you guys tell from the text? Or is that just like a job? Like, I'm a sophist, like I'm a lawyer. What do you think?
A way of thinking, like an optimist versus a pessimist kind of, where it's not an official title or a job, but it does speak to like your mentality.
Good. So it could be a framework or an approach. Good. Yeah, and I think kind of like, well, yeah, when I was in middle school, I started doing debate, and I remember being really surprised that they were like, you have to argue both sides of this position. I was like, why do I want to argue both sides of this position? Like, don't I want to figure out which position is right? No. You need to learn how to make the strongest argument for both cases, and there's reasons to do that, right? And part of it is to have the flexibility of mindset to assess different possibilities. Socrates is called a sophist by Thrasymachus after Thrasymachus gets pretty pissed off and he's trying to insult him. Because basically he comes into the discussion. It says he comes in like he's compared, like when we talk about characterization, he comes in like a wild animal. He comes in like a wrecking ball. Like he's ready to cause trouble. From the look of it, he's here to start shit. And he's hyped about, being provocative. That's the other thing. Socrates has a reputation for being publicly very critical of anyone who engages in what he thinks of as sophistry versus philosophy. Basically, he's suspicious of anyone who is in the habit of making arguments on behalf of the state or the powerful, right? And who won't go against those things. And he's already got a type of reputation for that. So it's kind of fitting that, he's a chaos causer, and he comes in looking like, literally, he says, a wild animal. Like he's looking like a vulture. So there's even something darker, because of course we know Socrates dies eventually, right? And the way Plato portrays it is that he's killed by what are effectively sophists and people on the side of the sophists, right? So he comes in like a vulture too, going to pick over the corpse of Socrates one day. And when he's really getting mad at their interaction, he says, you're not a true philosopher. You're a sophist. And his argument, it's kind of easy, I think, in some ways to, if you can read it just in its dramatic context and be like, okay, this is clearly the bad guy. But in another way, he's the guy who brings the stakes of the argument. He's the one who really moves the plot of the narrative, the plot of the play. He is the provocateur. And as with all the definitions that you read, there's going to be parts of it that you have a hard time denying. He makes fun of the Socratic method to start off with. He says, you just use the Socratic method, Socrates, to confuse people, to make them doubt their intelligence, doubt their expertise, and to make them intimidated by you. And then after you've confused them and tricked them through this method, you come in and you say, look at me, I'm the real philosopher. Now I'm going to teach you what's really true. So you are a sophist too. And so he denigrates the entire method of Socratic inquiry. And he says, I'm going to refute the notion that justice is good. This is really drama. I'm going to refute the notion that justice is good. I'm going to refute that the just man does good to himself and others. I'm going to refute that people benefit from being just. I'm going to refute that there is a common good justice seeks. So I'd write that down, that this is a tall order. And you can kind of see, you guys have done such a good job with the definitions that come from Cephalus and Polemarchus. You can see that both of them are interested in what we already know from what we studied. The Greeks are interested in too. What's effective? What works? What are the goods of effectiveness? But also they're interested in moral goods too. So you have all these discussions about, well, what is really useful? What would it mean to harm someone? What does it mean to owe someone something? All these really precise things that can get you into really fascinating ethical rabbit holes. Thrasymachus just comes in and goes, you can't